The cold wind howled across the abandoned rail yard as Daniel, a retired Marine, stood before the rusted train car he'd just inherited. His family's laughter still echoed in his mind. A pile of junk. That's your big inheritance? But beside him, his loyal German shepherd Rex tilted his head, sniffing the air with unusual curiosity. Daniel brushed snow from the corroded door, his breath visible in the morning chill. Something about this old train felt alive. The dog barked sharply, claws scraping at the metal, refusing to back away, and within seconds Daniel would realize this wasn't just a forgotten relic of the past. Hidden inside that rusted car was a secret so shocking it would change everything he thought he knew about his family and his own destiny. Before we start, make sure to hit like, share, and subscribe. And really, I'm curious, where are you watching from? Drop your country name in the comments. I love seeing how far our stories travel. The ticking of the old wall clock echoed through the lawyer's office as Daniel sat stiffly in his chair, his hands resting on his knees. He wasn't expecting much, maybe a few keepsakes from his late uncle's estate. Around him, his relatives whispered eagerly, their smiles sharp and greedy. They'd already started guessing who would get the mansion, the vintage cars, the stocks. Daniel just waited in silence, his loyal German shepherd Rex lying quietly at his feet. When the lawyer began reading the will, the atmosphere shifted from anticipation to smug delight. His cousin Emma gasped when her name was called. She was left a lake house. His brother Carl got the farmland and all its profits, and then it came to Daniel. To my nephew, Daniel Miller. I leave the red train car parked at the old Maple Ridge rail yard. The room went dead silent, then erupted into laughter. Carl slapped his knee, grinning. A train car? Seriously? Guess Uncle thought you'd enjoy another piece of junk to fix, soldier boy. Emma smirked, whispering something about sentimental scraps. Even the lawyer hesitated, glancing at Daniel with quiet pity. But Daniel said nothing. He simply nodded, stood up, and called softly, "Come on, Rex." As he turned to leave, Carl called out, "Hey, Dan, maybe that rust bucket has ghosts from your war days inside." The room filled with laughter again. Daniel didn't look back. Years of military discipline had taught him how to keep his head high, even when others tried to break him down. Outside, the cold winter air hit his face, sharp and clean. Rex padded beside him, ears twitching. Daniel looked down at his companion and managed a small smile. "Looks like we got ourselves a train car, buddy," he murmured. The dog wagged his tail once, as if to say he didn't care what anyone thought. He glanced toward the horizon, where faint railway tracks disappeared into the fog. His uncle had always been a quiet man, mysterious, private. Daniel couldn't shake the feeling that this inheritance wasn't random. Maybe it was a message. Maybe, just maybe, there was something his uncle wanted only him to find. As Rex barked once into the icy wind, Daniel made up his mind. Tomorrow he'd visit the Maple Ridge rail yard. If his family thought this was a joke, he was about to find out the truth behind it. The morning sun broke through a haze of frost as Daniel drove his old pickup along the winding road toward the outskirts of town. The radio hummed softly, but his mind was elsewhere, on the laughter from yesterday echoing in his ears like a cruel refrain. A train car, he muttered under his breath. Of all things. Rex sat in the passenger seat, tongue lolling, eyes alert to every passing sound. To anyone else, it was just another drive through the countryside. But to Daniel, this trip carried the weight of something deeper. A quiet sense of duty, the kind that never left a soldier's heart. He had been out of the service for nearly 6 years, yet some habits refused to fade. The way he scanned the road, the way his body tensed at sudden noises, the way sleep came in short, restless bursts, all reminders of places he wished he could forget. Afghanistan had taken friends, left scars, and given him Rex, a K9 trained for detection and protection. Together they had seen the worst of humanity and survived it. Now the same dog who once sniffed out explosives in war zones was sitting beside him, head tilted as if sensing Daniel's turmoil. Daniel tightened his grip on the steering wheel. He remembered the day his uncle first met Rex. The old man had smiled, his eyes warm but knowing. "A soldier and his dog," he'd said. "There's no bond stronger than that." Those words lingered in Daniel's memory now. as he wondered what his uncle had seen in that rusted relic of a train car, and why he had left it to him alone. They passed through the edge of town, where faces turned to watch his truck roll by. People still called him the vet with a mix of respect and distance. Some thanked him for his service. Others simply stared, unsure how to speak to a man who carried invisible ghosts. Daniel didn't mind. He had Rex. That was enough. As the truck climbed a small hill, the view opened into a wide valley. Beyond the frozen fields and skeletal trees, he could see the old rail yard stretching across the horizon. Rows of forgotten cars stood in silence, their once red paint now dull and scarred by decades of weather. Steam from a nearby plant drifted lazily across the sky, mixing with the chill air like breath from another time. Daniel parked near the entrance and killed the engine. For a moment he sat still, listening to the ticking of the cooling motor. Then he turned to Rex. "You ready, partner?" The dog gave a soft bark, tail swishing once. Daniel smiled faintly and opened the door. The crunch of snow under his boots sounded louder than it should have. As he looked out at the vast, silent yard, a sense of purpose settled in his chest. Whatever waited inside that train car, he was finally ready to find it. The rail yard stretched out before Daniel like a graveyard of steel giants. Rusted engines and forgotten freight cars lined the frost-covered tracks, their metal skins scarred by decades of neglect. The air smelled of iron and cold dust. Every crunch of snow beneath his boots echoed through the stillness, carried away by the biting winter wind. Rex walked a few paces ahead, nose twitching, tail low, alert but curious. The red train car wasn't hard to find. It sat apart from the others, half buried in snow, its faded crimson paint peeling in long, jagged flakes. Time had turned it into a relic, a wounded memory of something once proud. The number 47B was barely visible on its side. The metal door hung crooked, the hinges stiff with rust. Daniel paused, taking in the sight, his breath forming white clouds in the frigid air. "This is it, boy," he muttered softly. "Our grand inheritance." Rex sniffed around the tracks, circling the train car as if inspecting it. His paw prints dotted the snow like scattered marks of curiosity. Daniel placed a gloved hand on the cold steel. It burned against his palm from the chill. For a moment he thought about turning back, about leaving this forgotten piece of his uncle's past to rot in silence. But something about it felt deliberate. His uncle was no fool. Every action he'd taken in life had meaning. A voice startled him from behind. "You lost, mister?" Daniel turned to see an old rail worker shuffling toward him, wrapped in a heavy coat, a cigarette dangling from his lips. His eyes squinted against the smoke. "No," Daniel replied. "Just looking at something my uncle left me." The man chuckled dryly. "You mean that car? Been sitting here longer than I've worked this yard. Folks say it's haunted." Daniel frowned. "Haunted?" The man shrugged. "Strange lights some nights. Whispers. Nobody touches it anymore." The worker ambled off, leaving Daniel with an uneasy silence. Rex gave a low growl, his ears pricked toward the train. Daniel crouched, rubbing the dog's neck. "Easy, boy. It's just an old car." Still, as the wind picked up, a faint metallic creak came from inside Manai, as if something had shifted. Daniel's pulse quickened. He stared at the dark slit between the door and the frame. "Tomorrow," he whispered, backing away. "We'll come back tomorrow and we'll open it." Rex barked once, sharp, urgent, almost warningly. Daniel glanced down at him. For the first time that day, he wondered if the old man had been right. The next morning dawned gray and silent, the kind of winter stillness that felt almost sacred. Daniel returned to the Maple Ridge rail yard with a thermos of coffee, a flashlight, and a stubborn sense of purpose. The snow crunched beneath his boots as he approached the same rusted car from yesterday. The red paint looked even duller in the daylight, the surface glistening with frost. But Rex wasn't looking at the car. He was circling it, tail stiff, nose pressed low to the ground. Daniel watched him closely. "What is it, boy?" he asked, kneeling beside him. Rex didn't answer, of course, but his behavior spoke volumes. The dog's body language was alert, focused, and unusually tense. He pawed at a section near the base of the train, sniffing repeatedly. Then he began to bark, short, deliberate bursts, the kind that signaled detection during his canine service days. Daniel's heart quickened. "You found something?" He ran his hand along the cold metal, searching for any clue. The train car looked sealed shut, the doors welded from age and rust. Yet Rex's reaction didn't waver. He kept scratching, whining softly, his gaze fixed on the side panel as if trying to warn Daniel. It wasn't aggression, it was insistence. Something inside that car was drawing him in. "Easy, Rex," Daniel said softly. "We'll check it out." He circled the train car, peering through the narrow windows clouded with grime. Inside, he could make out vague shapes, old boxes, maybe tools or piles of forgotten cargo. But nothing that justified the dog's urgency. And yet, he trusted Rex more than he trusted anyone alive. The dog had saved his life once. He wasn't about to start doubting him now. The cold deepened and snow began to fall again, slow, lazy flakes drifting across the rails. Daniel stepped back, exhaling heavily. "All right," he murmured, glancing at the car. "We'll come prepared tomorrow. Bring the crowbar, maybe a light kit." Rex gave a final bark as if confirming the plan. His breath rose in white clouds against the fading light. Daniel patted his shoulder. "Good work, partner. Whatever's in there, we'll find it." But as they turned to leave, a faint metallic thump echoed from inside the car, one neither of them could ignore. That night, Daniel parked his truck beside the rail yard and built a small campfire near the edge of the tracks. The flames flickered weakly against the biting cold, casting trembling shadows across the rusted train car. Rex lay close to him, head resting on his paws, eyes half open but alert. Daniel sipped coffee from his dented thermos, his breath fogging in the frigid air. The silence of the yard pressed in around them, vast, hollow, and lonely. He looked at Rex and smiled faintly. "You don't like this place either, do you?" The dog gave a quiet huff, lifting his head to glance toward the train. Even now he seemed uneasy, ears twitching at every creak of metal. Daniel threw another piece of wood into the fire. The crackle brought warmth, but not comfort. His mind began to drift backwarding, to the desert, to the sandstorms, to the moments that had forged their bond. It had been years ago, in Helmand Province. Daniel remembered the stifling heat, the sting of grit in his eyes, and the suffocating silence before an ambush. Rex had been his assigned K9, newly trained, restless, and eager. They had been patrolling a narrow canyon trail when Rex suddenly froze, ears erect, body rigid. The other soldiers had laughed it off. Probably just a lizard, someone had said. But Daniel trusted that look in the dog's eyes. He'd ordered everyone to stop. Seconds later, the explosion tore through the air, a buried IED detonating only yards ahead. The blast threw sand and debris across the rocks, the echo roaring through the valley. When the dust cleared, Daniel realized what Rex had done. The dog had sensed it. He had saved them all. From that day on, Daniel and Rex were inseparable, brothers in survival. He blinked, snapping back to the present as the fire cracked sharply. The cold night air felt heavier now. He reached over and scratched behind Rex's ears. "Guess your instincts were right back then," he murmured softly. "Maybe they're right again now." Rex looked up at him, eyes reflecting the firelight like amber glass. For a moment, the world felt still, just man, dog, and memory. A gust of wind swept through the yard, whistling between the train cars. The old red car groaned faintly in the darkness, its metal frame creaking as if breathing. Rex's head jerked up, ears alert. Daniel followed his gaze, heart pounding. He could swear he saw movement, a flicker of shadow through the crack in the door. He tightened his jacket and stared into the dark. "All right, old friend," he whispered, voice steady. "Whatever secret you're guarding, we'll find it together." Rex gave a low, confident growl, a promise between soldier and dog. The fire hissed in the wind, and beyond it the train car waited, silent, watching, as though it remembered too. The night deepened over the Maple Ridge rail yard, wrapping the world in a sheet of silence so thick it almost felt alive. Daniel lay half awake inside his truck, the engine off, the windows fogged from his breath. The faint glow of the dying campfire flickered through the windshield, its embers pulsing like tired stars. Rex lay curled beside the door, his ears twitching even in sleep. For a while, everything was still, until a sound cut through the quiet. It was faint at first, a low, metallic thud. Then another. Daniel's eyes snapped open. He held his breath, listening. The wind had died completely, yet the noise persisted, steady, deliberate, coming from the direction of the train car. He sat up slowly, heart beginning to race. Rex's head shot up, ears sharp, body tense. A low growl rumbled from his chest. Daniel reached for his flashlight and stepped out of the truck, his boots crunching softly on the frozen ground. The air was biting cold, sharp enough to sting his lungs. "Stay close," he whispered. Rex moved beside him like a shadow. They advanced toward the red train car, its massive frame looming in the moonlight, the rusted surface gleaming dully under the pale glow. Another sound, this time a dragging scrape of metal against metal. It came from inside. Daniel's fingers tightened around the flashlight. "Hello?" he called out cautiously. "Anyone there?" His voice echoed back unanswered. The only reply was the groan of the old car shifting slightly on its frozen wheels. Rex began barking, loud, insistent, pawing at the base of the door. Daniel's pulse pounded in his ears. He swept the flashlight beam along the length of the car. Nothing. No footprints in the snow. No signs of movement. Yet the noise had been real. He felt it in his bones. The vibration against the cold air, the subtle tremor underfoot. He crouched near the door and pressed his palm against the steel. The metal was colder than before, almost unnaturally so. Rex's barking grew louder, more frantic now. "Easy, boy," Daniel whispered, though his own voice trembled. "It's probably just the wind." But deep down he knew it wasn't. Another clang rang out, sharper this time, closer, like something knocking back. Daniel stumbled to his feet, flashlight trembling in his grip. The sound stopped as suddenly as it began, leaving a suffocating silence. Rex stood rigid, staring at the car, growling low. Daniel swallowed hard, his breath misting in the air. "Tomorrow," he muttered. "Tomorrow we open it, no matter what's inside." Rex barked once, a warning and a promise. Morning came gray and heavy, the sky blanketed with low clouds that promised more snow. Daniel rubbed his tired eyes, the memory of the strange midnight noises still echoing in his head. He'd barely slept, every creak and whisper of wind keeping him alert. Rex hadn't rested either. He had sat by the train car all night, his gaze fixed on it like a sentinel. Whatever had stirred inside, it had unsettled them both. Now armed with a crowbar, flashlight, and renewed determination, Daniel approached the red train car again. The metal surface was coated in frost, the air thick with quiet tension. "All right, buddy," he muttered, tightening his gloves. "Let's see what you've been trying to tell me." Rex trotted ahead, tail low, nose pressed to the cold metal. He barked once and began scratching near the same spot he'd fixated on the day before, a narrow panel near the base of the car, where the rust seemed darker, almost hollow-sounding. Daniel knelt beside him, running his fingers over the corroded surface. When he knocked gently, the sound that came back wasn't solid. It echoed faintly like there was space behind it. His heartbeat quickened. "Good boy, Rex," he whispered. "You found something." He wedged the crowbar into the seam and pushed. The metal groaned but resisted. Another shove, harder this time, and the edge began to give. Rust cracked, flakes falling like snow. Rex barked eagerly, his tail thumping the ground. Daniel gritted his teeth and pried with all his strength until, with a sudden metallic snap, the panel tore loose and fell to the ground with a clang. A wave of stale, dusty air poured out. Daniel coughed, waving it away as he aimed his flashlight inside. What he saw made his breath catch. There was a small hidden compartment, a space barely large enough for a man to crawl through. Inside, wooden crates sat stacked in the shadows, their edges marked with faded military symbols. Daniel's pulse pounded in his ears. He reached in carefully and pulled one of the boxes toward him. It was surprisingly heavy. The wood was aged, the nails rusted. He pried it open slowly, the creak echoing through the hollow car. Inside were sealed envelopes, metal tags, and an old photograph. Soldiers standing beside a train car that looked eerily familiar. One of them, younger and proud, was his uncle. Daniel stared in stunned silence. "Uncle John, what were you hiding here?" he whispered. Rex sniffed the box, whining softly, his eyes darting toward the deeper shadows of the compartment. There were more crates inside, untouched for decades. Daniel felt the weight of revelation pressing on him. Whatever this place was, it wasn't just a train car. It was a vault, and his uncle had left it for a reason. Rex barked once, sharp and certain. Daniel exhaled. "All right, boy," he said quietly. "Let's see what secrets you just dug up." Daniel sat inside his truck, the open crate resting on the passenger seat beside him. The cold wind howled outside, rattling the windows, but he barely noticed. His flashlight still lay across his lap, its beam dim now, flickering weakly. Inside the box were the things that wouldn't leave his mind. The photograph of his uncle in uniform, the sealed envelope stamped with faded military insignias, and a set of old metal tags tied together with a strip of leather. Each item whispered of a story buried for decades. He picked up his phone and stared at it for a moment, hesitating. Then he dialed. His brother Carl answered after a few rings, his tone already smug. "So you finally opened that junk heap? Find any ghosts?" Daniel kept his voice steady. "I found something. Military crates, papers. A photograph of Uncle John in uniform, same car, same markings." "I think this train was part of something big," Carl snorted. "You're kidding, right? Probably just scrap left behind from some old warehouse." "Don't get your hopes up, Dan. You always think everything's a mission." Daniel's grip tightened around the phone. He wanted to argue, to shout that this wasn't a joke. But instead he said quietly, "You'll see. This means something. He left it for a reason." Sure, Carl replied, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "Maybe next you'll tell me there's treasure buried under it. You and that mutt can dig it up together." Daniel ended the call. The silence that followed was deafening. Rex shifted in the back seat, sensing his frustration, and gave a low whine. Daniel reached back, scratching his head. "They'll never understand, huh, boy?" He looked back toward the train car, now dark against the snowy horizon. The open panel revealed the hidden compartment, its shadows swallowing secrets the world had forgotten. He didn't know what the papers meant yet, but his instincts told him this was more than luck. It was a message, maybe even a warning. The wind picked up, tugging at his coat as he stepped out. He stared at the car, his breath fogging in the cold. "They can laugh all they want," he murmured. "But we're not done here," Rex barked softly as if agreeing. Somewhere deep inside that old train, history was waiting, and Daniel intended to uncover every last piece of it. The next morning, the world was white with fresh snow, the air crisp and sharp as glass. Daniel arrived early at the rail yard, his breath forming thick clouds as he carried a small toolbox and notebook. The red train car stood in solemn silence, its rusty body half buried in snow, like a relic refusing to die. Rex bounded ahead, tail wagging with purpose. Whatever they had stumbled upon, Daniel could feel it. They were standing on the edge of something far bigger than a forgotten inheritance. He climbed into the compartment again, brushing away layers of dust from the wooden crates. The air inside was heavy, carrying the scent of old oil and age. He used a screwdriver to pry open another box, the wood creaking like a groan from the past. Inside were neatly stacked documents sealed in yellowed envelopes stamped with faded ink that read, "Confidential, U.S. Military Transport, 1945. Daniel's heart pounded. He unfolded one of the documents carefully, the paper brittle between his fingers. It listed cargo manifests, troop routes, and references to Operation Morning Star. He'd never heard of it. The more he read, the deeper the chill in his chest grew. There were references to recovered assets, hidden storage sites, and unregistered transport numbers, all pointing back to this very rail line. Rex whined softly beside him, sniffing the air as if sensing the gravity of what they'd found. Daniel picked up a photograph tucked beneath the papers, black and white, edges frayed. It showed a group of soldiers standing proudly beside a train car identical to this one. Their uniforms bore the same division insignia his uncle once wore. And there, standing front and center, was a young man Daniel recognized immediately. Uncle John, barely 20, his eyes burning with quiet confidence. Daniel sat back, overwhelmed. His uncle had been part of something classified, something never meant to be public. But why had he hidden all of this instead of turning it in? What had he been protecting? He flipped through another envelope and found a small notebook written in his uncle's careful handwriting. The last entry sent a shiver down his spine. The gold was never meant to be moved again. If it ever is, it will destroy what we fought for. Gold? Daniel stared at the words, his pulse racing. He closed the book slowly, realization sinking in. This wasn't just military paperwork. It was the trail to a buried secret from the war itself. Rex barked once, sharp and alert. Daniel looked up, eyes narrowing toward the open doorway. Snow drifted in quietly. "You're right, boy," he murmured. "Whatever he was guarding, we're just getting started." Daniel sat on the edge of the train car's open compartment, the cold metal biting through his jeans as he held his uncle's notebook in one hand and the old photograph in the other, his breath fogged in the frigid air. The world around him was silent except for the soft panting of Rex, who watched intently, his tail still, his eyes alert. The pages of the notebook were fragile, but Daniel turned them carefully, scanning the neat, faded handwriting. Operation Morning Star, transport of recovered assets, 1945 golden documents secured under civilian cover. Keep it quiet. The world isn't ready for what's inside. Daniel's pulse quickened. Gold, hidden assets. His uncle hadn't just been a rail worker. He'd been part of a classified recovery mission after the war. The realization hit him hard. These crates weren't just history. They were evidence. And if even a fraction of what the notebook claimed was true, it meant his uncle had safeguarded something the government might have buried, or worse, wanted forgotten. He reached for one of the remaining crates, prying it open with his crowbar. The lid groaned, the smell of old wood and dust filling the air. Inside, wrapped in layers of canvas, were small metal bars, tarnished but unmistakable. He pulled one free, the weight solid in his hand. The dull sheen of gold caught the weak sunlight streaming through the crack in the door. Daniel's stomach twisted. He stared, frozen. "No way," he whispered. Rex let out a low whine, circling near his legs as if sensing the gravity of the moment. Daniel placed the bar gently on the floor beside him and unrolled the canvas further. There were more, dozens, maybe hundreds, and beneath them another layer of sealed envelopes. One was labeled simply, "To whoever finds this, forgive me." His throat tightened. He tore it open carefully. Inside was a handwritten letter, dated nearly 40 years ago. "I couldn't return it. Too many hands wanted it for the wrong reasons. I hid it where no one would think to look, among rust and silence. If you're reading this, the world will try to take it from you. Don't let them. Protect it. Use it for something good." Daniel's hands trembled. His uncle hadn't been hiding stolen gold. He had been protecting it. Protecting something far greater than wealth. The integrity of those who had died to stop evil. He exhaled shakily, closing the letter. "You did the right thing, Uncle," he whispered. "And now it's my turn." Rex barked softly, the sound echoing across the empty yard. Daniel knew what came next. This discovery wasn't just valuable, it was dangerous. If anyone found out, there would be questions, greed, maybe even threats. He packed everything carefully back into the crate, securing it with rope and covering the entrance again. "We'll take this slow," he murmured to Rex, step by step. As the sun dipped below the horizon, Daniel glanced once more at the car. His uncle's secret had survived decades of silence. Now it rested in his hands, and what he did next could change everything. By dawn, Daniel's nerves were frayed. He hadn't slept, his mind spinning between disbelief and dread. The crates full of gold, the documents, the letter, and it was too much to process. Every instinct in him screamed that he couldn't keep this a secret forever. Yet something told him that sharing it too soon could be dangerous. He had seen what greed did to men, in war, in family, in life. Still, he needed help to verify what he'd found. He sat in his truck with his phone in hand, scrolling through contacts until he stopped on one name. Captain Ryan Lewis, retired Intelligence Corps. A man he trusted. Daniel hesitated only a moment before pressing call. "Ryan, it's Dan," he said when the voice answered. "I need your eyes on something big. Something from the war." There was a long pause on the other end. "You sound serious," Ryan said. "Where are you?" "The Maple Ridge Rail Yard," Daniel replied quietly. "And I think my uncle left behind something the government never declared." Ryan didn't ask for details. He only said, "Don't move it. Don't tell anyone. I'll be there." But it was already too late for secrecy. That afternoon, as Daniel returned to the train car, he noticed fresh footprints in the snow near the gate. Not his, not Ryan's. His heart sank. Someone else had been there. He scanned the area, his military instincts kicking in. The wind carried faint voices from beyond the fence. Two men whispering, "Told you there's something in that old car. The vet found it." Daniel crouched behind a pile of scrap. Rex pressed close beside him, growling low. Whoever they were, they knew. Maybe they'd heard from Carl. Maybe word had spread faster than expected. Either way, Daniel had a problem. He backed quietly toward his truck, keeping one hand on Rex's collar. Easy, boy, he whispered. We're not picking a fight. Not today. He reached the vehicle, started the engine, and drove a short distance down the road to a spot hidden behind an old maintenance shed. From there, he watched as two figures approached the train car, flashlights slicing through the fading daylight. Rex barked once, sharp and angry. Daniel placed a calming hand on his back. I know, he murmured. We'll protect it, just like he did. Minutes felt like hours before the strangers finally retreated, leaving only boot marks and silence behind. Daniel exhaled, relief mingled with rising determination. The world was closing in on a secret that had survived for generations. He needed to move faster, contact Ryan, secure the site, get proof before greed devoured truth. He turned the key, headlights cutting through the falling snow. Come on, Rex, he said, voice steady now. We're not running away. We're just getting ready for the fight ahead. Rex's ears perked, tail low but resolute. Together, they drove into the storm, chasing time before time caught them first. The following day, Daniel stood guard at the train car, exhaustion etched deep beneath his eyes. The snow had stopped, leaving the rail yard eerily quiet. Rex sat beside him, tail stiff, his gaze fixed on the gate. Daniel had already called Ryan, who was on his way with a retired investigator to authenticate the discovery. But even before help arrived, he sensed trouble brewing, the kind that didn't wait for proof. The crunch of tires on gravel snapped his attention up. A black SUV pulled up near the fence. When the doors opened, his brother Carl stepped out, followed by Emma and their cousin Ben. Their faces wore the same look they'd had at the will reading, half amusement, half disbelief. But this time, there was something darker in their eyes. Greed. Dan, Carl called, forcing a grin. Heard some crazy rumors about that old train. Mind if we take a look? Daniel crossed his arms. You shouldn't be here. Emma laughed softly, her breath misting in the air. Relax, we just want to see what's gotten you so worked up. You've been acting strange, calling old army buddies, hanging around this dump like it's gold. Rex growled, stepping forward. His hackles rose, his deep chest vibrating with warning. Carl froze, smirking nervously. You still letting that beast do the talking for you? Daniel's tone hardened. Leave, Carl, this isn't your business. Ben shifted uncomfortably, glancing at the open door of the train car. What's inside? He asked quietly. Daniel didn't answer. The silence said enough. Emma's gaze followed his, and realization flickered across her face. You found something, she whispered. Didn't you? Before Daniel could respond, Rex barked sharply, cutting through the tension. All eyes turned toward the far end of the yard, where headlights flickered through the fog. Another vehicle approaching fast. Carl frowned. You called the cops? Daniel shook his head. No. I called someone who can tell me the truth. The SUV drew closer, its tires grinding against the snow. The sight of it made Carl's expression shift from curiosity to unease. Rex moved closer to Daniel, muscles taut, eyes locked on the approaching car. Daniel's breath came slow and steady, his heart thundering beneath his coat. He knew what was coming. Confrontation, revelation, and the moment everything would change. Stay back, he warned quietly. This isn't just about money anymore, Rex barked once, sharp and firm, standing like a soldier ready for battle. The car came to a stop, and the truth, the one his family had mocked him for chasing, was about to break open in front of them all. The SUV door opened, and Captain Ryan Lewis stepped out, his breath clouding in the cold air. A second man followed, gray-haired, wearing a Department of Historical Recovery badge on his jacket. Daniel felt a wave of relief. Ryan, he greeted, shaking his hand firmly. You made it. Ryan gave a nod, his sharp eyes already scanning the scene. The open train car, the nervous family, the barking dog. You weren't exaggerating, he said. This place looks like a forgotten time capsule. Carl folded his arms. And who exactly are you? Ryan glanced at him coolly. Someone who knows when people dig into things they don't understand. His tone cut through the cold like steel. He turned to Daniel. Show me. Daniel led them toward the car. The moment the flashlight beam swept inside, the older man gasped. My God, he whispered, stepping closer. His gloved hand brushed the markings on one of the crates. These insignias, they're authentic. U.S. military, 1945, this car. It's part of the lost Morning Star transport. We thought it was destroyed. Emma blinked. Morning Star? What does that even mean? The man straightened slowly, his voice trembling with awe. It was a covert operation. After World War II, Allied forces recovered stolen assets. Art, gold, records. Most of it was returned, but some shipments vanished. This car was one of them. Carl's mouth fell open. You're saying this junkyard train is full of gold? Before Daniel could answer, Rex began barking furiously, snapping their attention toward the edge of the yard. Two of the men who had been snooping earlier reappeared, flashlights cutting through the fog. There it is! One shouted. Grab what you can. Get behind me. Ryan barked, drawing his sidearm. Daniel stepped forward instinctively, placing himself between his family and the intruders. Rex lunged, teeth bared, a thunderous growl shaking the air. The men hesitated, startled by the ferocity of the dog. Police sirens wailed in the distance and the sound of backup approaching. The thieves bolted, slipping away into the shadows just as officers flooded the yard. Within minutes, flashing red and blue lights illuminated the snow. The officers surrounded the train, securing the area. Ryan exhaled, lowering his weapon. You did the right thing calling me, Dan, he said. You just uncovered one of the most significant hidden recoveries in post-war history. Emma stared at her brother, speechless. Carl ran a hand through his hair, his voice shaky. So, all this time, Uncle John? He wasn't crazy? Daniel smiled faintly, eyes glistening. No. He was protecting something that wasn't his to take, but too precious to lose. Rex nudged his leg, tail wagging softly now as if sensing victory. Reporters began arriving by the hour, cameras flashing, questions flying, but Daniel barely heard them. He just looked at the train car, once mocked, now surrounded by history and truth, then whispered, You were right, Uncle, you did it, and in the distance, the first morning sun glinted off the snow, reflecting faintly on the edge of gold. The days that followed were a blur of reporters, government officials and historians descending upon the Maple Ridge rail yard. What had once been an abandoned relic was now the center of national attention. Fences went up, security teams moved in, and news cameras flashed against the frostbitten steel of the red train car. Yet amid the noise and chaos, Daniel remained calm, standing beside Rex as he had through every battle. This one just happened to be quieter. Ryan's report confirmed what Daniel already knew. The crates contained not only gold bars but also priceless military documents and artifacts on evidence of one of the last secret recovery missions of World War II. Historians called it the greatest post-war discovery of the decade. News outlets hailed Daniel as the veteran who had uncovered the lost train of morning star, but Daniel never saw it that way. To him, it wasn't about fame or fortune. It was about honoring a man who had carried a burden in silence. His uncle had been branded eccentric, dismissed as a hermit, even mocked by his own family. Yet in the end, he had proven to be the quiet guardian of a treasure meant for the world, not for himself. When the government offered Daniel a share of the recovered assets, he accepted, but only to give most of it away. He donated large portions to veterans' charities, historical restoration projects, and war memorials in honor of his fallen brothers. The gold was hidden to protect something pure, he told a reporter. If I hoarded it, I'd betray the very thing my uncle stood for. Carl and Emma could barely meet his eyes when they saw him again. Their laughter, their mockery, all of it had turned into silence heavy with regret. Daniel didn't gloat. He simply nodded, a quiet forgiveness in his eyes that spoke louder than any revenge. That evening, when the last of the news crews left and the yard fell silent again, Daniel knelt beside Rex, ruffling his fur. You did it, buddy, he said softly. You saw what none of us did. You trusted your instincts, and just like in the field. Rex wagged his tail, leaning into his touch. The wind rustled through the broken rails, carrying with it the echoes of history. The world saw gold and glory. Daniel saw loyalty, courage, and a promise finally kept. A week later, the rail yard was quiet again. The crowds were gone, the cameras packed away, and the headlines had faded into history. What remained was peace, the kind Daniel hadn't felt in years. The red train car had been restored and preserved as a national exhibit, surrounded by a small fence and a plaque bearing the words, "In honor of those who protected truth, even when the world wasn't watching." Daniel stood there with Rex at his side, the winter wind ruffling the dog's fur. The afternoon sun cast a soft golden hue over the rails, warming the cold metal and shimmering faintly on the train's once-forgotten surface. For a moment, Daniel just watched the light dance over it, the car that had changed everything. He knelt beside Rex, scratching gently behind his ear. "You always knew, didn't you, buddy?" he murmured. "You saw what no one else could. You trusted your instincts, and because of that, we gave a man's legacy back to the world." Rex leaned into him, his tail thumping softly in the snow, eyes calm and proud. Daniel thought of his uncle, of the lonely years he'd spent guarding a secret too big to share. "You weren't hiding gold," Daniel whispered toward the train. "You were protecting hope." Behind him, he heard footsteps crunching through the snow. Ryan approached, hands in his coat pockets, a smile tugging at the corner of his lips. "They're talking about naming a veteran's scholarship in your uncle's honor," he said. "His story, your story. It's inspiring people." Daniel smiled faintly. He'd like that. He never wanted recognition, just to do the right thing. Ryan nodded, glancing at Rex. "And I think that dog of yours deserves a medal too." Daniel laughed softly. He doesn't need one. He already knows he's a hero. For a while, they stood in silence, watching the sunset bleed across the sky. The golden light touched everything. The rails, the snow, the rusted corners of the train, turning it all into something sacred. As Ryan left, Daniel stayed a little longer. He sat down beside the tracks, resting his hand on Rex's back. The German shepherd let out a quiet sigh, his head on Daniel's knee. The world felt still again, like it had taken a deep breath after a long storm. Daniel looked at the plaque one last time and smiled. "Guess the old man had the last laugh after all," he said softly. "He gave me more than an inheritance. He gave me purpose." Rex barked once, breaking the silence as if agreeing. Daniel stood, giving one final glance at the train car that had once been mocked, now a monument to courage, loyalty, and truth. "Come on, partner," he said, patting Rex's back. "Let's go home." And together they walked away, leaving behind the rusted rail and carrying with them a story that would never be forgotten.